When it comes to scamming, it's far easier to scam your own people than to scam strangers or a different community. If you have a population of Irish people, it's far easier for an Irish scammer to scam his fellow Irish people. Psychologically, that's how it works. Because to scam someone, you need to win their trust. It doesn't have to be deep rooted trust like in friendship or in a marriage, but you just need to have some basic trust between you and the other individual. Or better said, you have to provoke that trust on their behalf into you. And that goes far easier when you're similar to those people. That's why scammers, 99% of the time, they scam their own people, their own relatives, their own friends. But if they know that relatives and friends are too risky to scam, they'll scam people like their relatives and like their friends. For example, if you have a Chinese scammer, he will likely scam fellow Chinese folks, or maybe he'll try a Korean or a Japanese individual because they're similar to him. Not the same, but similar. But he would be careful to go to West Africa and scam people over there. Because, first of all, he doesn't look like them, he's not that similar to them, so they're going to ask questions. But here's the thing, when you're similar to someone, you tend to be more comfortable around them. That's human. There's nothing wrong with that. Scammers know this and they take advantage of it. Why am I talking about scammers? It is because I want to redirect this topic towards white rage. What is white rage? You know what, let me put this thing down somewhere so I can just hold on. Sorry, I need to do this. Okay. What is white rage? White rage is the desperation many white people, or let's call them Caucasians, because actual white people don't exist, but we use the term white people or Caucasian to refer to a specific ethnicity. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about there. White rage is the desperation many white people feel due to the loss of their perceived heritage. I said perceived heritage because this is how it went. At the end of the 18th century, the wizards wanted white people to comply with racism. They wanted collective racism or popular racism because they needed white folks to comply with white supremacy, because white supremacy was the only hoax they had that worked in keeping the human population trapped. So to validate their white god worship, which refers to Helios or Apollo, they needed white folks to comply. And it worked through nationalism and all of that. Well, past century, in the Second World War, it all escalated, and since then, the wizards they don't want popular racism anymore because that's too risky and that gets out of hand quickly. They want the institutions of the world to remain racist, but everyone else needs to become multicultural. But you have generations of white folks that became attached to this popular racism idea, and they think that's their heritage, while it's not. So they're confusing the ethnic history and the commodities of their ancestors with this programming of the 19th century. So what's going on now is that they realize that this heritage is fading away. And not only that, whites are dropping in numbers worldwide. So now you have white cults thinking that there's a white genocide going on, that there's a deep-rooted plot to kill all white people. First of all, if that's true, then I expect to hear reports throughout Europe of colored people picking up knives and guns and killing white folks all the time. Does that happen? No, it doesn't. Yes, there are incidents in which many whites kill or harm other whites. And from time to time, you have incidents where foreigners harm whites. It happens, okay? But not that there is this systematic killing of whites. It's not going on. But yet you have a lot of white folks that think this is going on. Why? Because they feel threatened. They feel as if their heritage is taken away from them, but that heritage was a hoax. Because this is what happened in the 19th century. Every achievement by blacks, for example, the Spanish Empire had to disappear. Now you know why they almost never talk about the Spanish Empire, because it was built by blacks under Spanish supervision. The same with the Portuguese Empire. That's why you seldom hear of it. You never hear that Central America was a prosperous kingdom that was wanted by the world. You never hear that in history class. Why? Because then people can ask, how did this kingdom fade away like that? Or who built this kingdom? Oh, those were blacks that were imported from Africa. They're the ones that built it for the Spanish. Oh, so black people built that kingdom. So how are the blacks today in Central America? Oh, please don't talk about that. Oh, there's racism against them. Why is there racism against them? Well, they're the ones that built that place. You get what I'm saying here? So the white heritage that's been given to Europeans and Americans, say the white people in general, is based on a hoax. Yes, there were white people that accomplished things throughout history, of course, just like there were Chinese people, there were Mayan people. You have all kinds of folks that accomplished things throughout history. But the white heritage was given onto whites in the 19th century, debased the achievements of all other people, or they plagiarized those achievements by crediting them to white folks who often never existed. And this gave an impression as if whites were the majority of the world, even though that was far from the truth. And after the Second World War, it became obvious that they were in the minority, they've always been. Though to the economic boom of the United States, this white heritage scam remained for a longer time. Now, this white heritage scam that emerged in the 19th century is over. It doesn't work that well anymore, and also because whites are dropping in numbers because they don't have sufficient babies. I don't go into that now, but it's quite weird that an ethnicity doesn't realize it needs to reproduce. But okay, that's going on now. So now you have a portion of white folks that are freaking out and they're losing it. They're losing it against other white people. They want to take out their rage on other white folks, but they pretend as if they want to pour out their rage on blacks, on Chinese, on those other folks. No, they're upset and disappointed in their own leaders and in their fellow white folks that don't get along with the scam anymore. That's what they're upset about. So those right-wing racist groups that are emerging, they are a danger to their fellow whites first. So that's not something foreigners nor blacks have to really worry about, because they rage against their fellow whites. And it will not take long before they begin to act out that rage on the fellow white folks. So that's something white folks need to pay attention to. They have dangerous, out of control, on the loose folks amongst them that are about to take their rage out on them. Now, what does this have to do with scamming? Apart from this white heritage thing, white folks have been scammed by their own white leaders. Remember I said it's far easier to scam people that look like you, that are similar to you, than it is to scam people that are different than you. This white, apart from white heritage, let me say like this: white heritage was used as a scam to further scam white people. And here's the thing: if you scam someone out of their pocket money, they may think, this guy lied to me, now I lost a few $100. That can happen. And people will be upset, but eventually realize, okay, I need to move on, it's just money. But if you scam people out of their time, out of their health, out of their well-being, out of their children, out of their future, when you do that more than 2 generations long, oh dear, when people finally find out that they've been scammed for so long and that it cost them so much, you have trouble. And what's going on now amongst the white ethnicity? The white ethnicity isn't that homogeneous. There are differences, just like you have people in Scandinavia, you have whites in Australia. So there are differences, don't get me wrong, but overall what you see is that they are in denial. Some places are deeper in denial, like the Netherlands, straight up. Others are less in denial, for example in Australia, but there is denial. And this denial breeds resentment amongst her own against her own. And this is what breeds white rage. Because you have the almost a majority that's in denial, they don't want to talk about it. And I'm not talking about the historical narratives, okay? I'm talking about the fact that the historical narratives were used to scam them out of their health, out of their well-being, out of their future, out of their children. When you have almost a majority that's denying this, and you have a small portion that knows what's going on, but they're so frustrated because nobody wants to pay attention to what's really going on. And that portion radicalizes. And then the wizards that run the world come along and think, we can use these frustrated people to spread hatred. And that's what's going on. So, what I'm about to say here is that white folks need to admit that they have been scammed. I'm not forget about historical narratives, about national history and all that. Forget about that. Those things were used to scam you. Okay? And look, as I mentioned before, it's easier to scam someone that's similar to you than someone that's different. So blacks had blacks scamming them. We had. But here's a big difference. You cannot, you absolutely cannot, as a black individual, get away with scamming blacks. You know why? Because this is the attitude blacks have. Now, there are cases where it's a bit more mild, but this is the attitudes blacks have. If you are a sellout and you are lying to them just to take advantage of them, once they are aware of this, you're finished. Black during the time of history, black during the time of slavery, during the time of slavery, it happens that blacks lynched other blacks that were selling them out. If you had coons, like we called them, amongst the plantation, they were finished. And later, after slavery, in the corporate world, it became like this. Even till this day, it's like that. If a so-called black individual will come out to speak up for blacks, so-called support blacks, because he's really there just to take advantage of them, he's finished. In the worst case scenario, he's dead. In the best case scenario, he's on a blacklist and almost no black individual will want anything to do with him. There are cases, unfortunately, where it escalates when blacks pick up guns and they become physical. Yeah, unfortunately, it happens. I'm not agreeing with it, but amongst blacks, it's like that. Try to scam us, you're in trouble if you're one of us. But amongst the white ethnicity, I'm a bit shocked how much their leaders lie to them over and over again. It is as if many of them just settle for the scamming. I heard people say, well, Rashid, it's just the way it is. I want to be left alone, just leave it. I'm thinking, what? You're being lied to? You're being scammed? You're being taken advantage of? You're being cheated out of your natural rights? And you just think it's okay? Look, I'm not making this video to pick on whites. I'm just pointing out that this is the reason why there's white rage. It has nothing to do with all those migrants that are flooding Europe. It has nothing to do with the fact that there's a lot of mixed race marriages. Race doesn't even exist, but you get what I'm saying here. It has to do with the fact that the white ethnicity is in denial of the fact that they have been scammed and are being scammed. And a small portion of them escalates in frustration. And this leads to danger on the whole ethnicity. And from time to time there are incidents against other ethnicities, but in general it's their own ethnicity that suffers from it. But there's denial. And again, I'm not picking on whites here because when you look at Asia, especially East Asia, It's far worse. There, most folks aren't even aware they're being scammed. There, if you even mention the possibility that they're being scammed, you're finished. So in East Asia, it's far worse than amongst West. But I may make a video about East Asians soon, but about white rage, that's the root of it. Blacks know we're being scammed, often also by our own folks. We don't often deal with it properly, but we at least acknowledge it. In Asia, especially East Asia, they don't even know they're being scammed because the black magic works so intense on the people there. Amongst the white ethnicity, white people, please, for the well-being of your ethnicity and of yourself and of your future generations, please admit that you are being scammed. In the beginning, you may be shocked, you may be in denial, thinking, I can't, how can this be true? But there comes a point you need to admit that you have been scammed, and you need to process it. Because if you don't process it, you remain in a self-destructive loop. And there's one scam I'm going to reveal to you now. After the First World War, the German kings forfeited their thrones, and the population was in a shock. It was a deep shock that their leaders left them like that. And in this chaos, in this shock, France began to exploit Germany. So Germany had to pay for all the costs of the war, even though Germany didn't lose the war. France did. France was a mess, but Germany was still stable. Germany had industries. Germany had things going for it. You still had the German Empire without an emperor. They were all republics, but they were still a Deutsches Reich. But eventually, due to the exploitation by France, many Germans began to think that they were an economic wasteland. They became depressed. Depression increased in the population. And when depression increased, there were bankers taking advantage of this. Now you had high inflation. And during this mess, people became desperate for a solution. Even though the industry was there still working, but people thought it was a wasteland. And then this Apollonian cult emerged called the Nazis, and they came with a miracle. That miracle was hoax, because the only thing they did was they re-regulated the banknotes in the country, and they came with some projects here and there, and suddenly it appeared as if they had, as if the German Empire was risen from the ashes, from its ruins. It was never a ruin to begin with, because people thought it was a ruin, because the media at the time was lying to them. They now felt the need for a solution, though there was no solution needed, because the problem didn't exist. So it was a wizard trick that was used, that brought the Nazis to power, and later that was used to scam them into genocide and all of that. There's also a scam that needs to be processed. But instead of processing this scam, they often focus on the Jews. The Jews. Okay, many of the Jews, those white Jews, were killed, and it was a bad thing. It shouldn't have happened, and it should never happen again in the future. I agree with that, but what about the scam that led to it? Why aren't they talking about that? Why aren't they processing it? There's this thing, those who learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Let me say it better. If you don't process history, you'll be stuck in the cycle of history. And that will suck up your future and your present into doom. So, concerning white rage, the solution is process the historical traumas. While processing it, you'll heal as a community and you'll move forward. That's the way out. Not sending millions as reparations to Israel, not denying stuff for saying everything is fine, but processing things. Well, that's it for now. Keep agreeing with Christ, the real King, and be at peace.